The World Post and Reuters are reporting on the incredible instability and fighting that's currently going on in Israel and Palestine. So the region is on edge, and it looks like there might be another intifada. They report, quote, Palestinian men armed with knives and a gun killed at least 3 people and wounded several others in a string of attacks in Jerusalem near Tel Aviv on Tuesday on a day of rage, quote, day of rage that was declared by Palestinian groups. Officials said Israel's public security minister was considering whether to seal off Palestinian neighborhoods in East Jerusalem, home of many of the assailants of the past 2 weeks, from the rest of the city. Unlike their brethren in the occupied West Bank, Palestinians in East Jerusalem can travel in Israel without restrictions. Israel annexed East Jerusalem after a 1967 war in a move that is not recognized internationally. 2 Palestinians shot and stabbed passengers on a bus in Jerusalem, killing 2 and injuring 4. Minutes later, another Palestinian rammed his car into a bus stop in the center of Jerusalem, then got out and began stabbing pedestrians, killing 1 and wounding 6. They say 7 Israelis and 27 Palestinians, including 9 alleged attackers and 8 children, have died in almost 2 weeks of street attacks and security crackdowns. The violence has been stirred in part by Muslim anger over increasing Jewish visits to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem, Islam's holiest site outside the Arabian Peninsula. Palestinians also could be embarking on another uprising, reflecting a new generation's frustrations over their veteran leadership's failure to achieve statehood. Okay. So there's your run-through of that's the gist of what's happening there right now. Clearly, it's an absolute mess. And here's my takeaway on this, and here's my message. Don't do it. Don't do it. So the Palestinians need to know, number one, you're going to lose. If you're going to do an uprising, if you're going to be militaristic, you're going to lose 100%. Israel is significantly more powerful than you. And number 2, you killing civilians is wrong as well. Killing civilians is wrong across the board. So, including when you do it. There's no excuse for killing civilians on either side. And then the third thing I want to say is, BDS is going to work. Don't undermine that. So I think that's what Netanyahu is really scared of. If you'll notice, when stuff like this happens, Israel knows how to respond to violent threats. They've done it before. And they'll come back at you with 10 times the force that you came at them, and they'll level not only militants, but also civilians. We've seen the numbers from previous conflicts. So that's not, you're taking on the state of Israel in a way that's not, you're not gonna win, you're gonna lose, and it's gonna be a crushing victory for the state of Israel. BDS will work. So instead of going the violent route, go the economic route. Because when you go the economic route, we've seen historically, in apartheid South Africa to be specific, after a while, they go, oh shit, we're losing out on business, we're losing out on money, we're losing out of the lifeblood that lets our economy run. We have to get some sort of a deal. And also, I'd say this to people who are 100% on the side of Israel. So you don't want the violence, I don't want the violence, we agree 100%. So since violence is not the answer, and the Palestinians need to know that violence is not the answer, will you accept the deal now for the 1967 borders that the Palestinians proposed through Jordan at the UN recently? Again, I agree with you. You think violence is not the answer, how dare they kill any of our civilians? Oh, I agree 100%. Killing civilians is always wrong. So to bring an end to the nationalistic aspect of the anger, shouldn't we sit down at the table and get a peace deal using our words and being adults here, and then make it so that the majority of the anger on the other side goes away because one of their main goals is reached? Now, don't get me wrong, guys. Is there a significant chunk of the anger from the Palestinians that is based off of religion over nationalism, let's say? I think that's true. And in fact, again, this article laid it out pretty clearly that there are multiple reasons for them doing what they're doing. They say, quote, "The violence has been stirred in part by Muslim anger over increasing Jewish visits to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem, Islam's holiest site outside of the Arabian Peninsula." So for the people that are mad about this and angry over this, okay, you're going to have to www.getthefuckoverit.com, because under any peace deal, they're still going to be allowed to go to that area, and they should be, because it's also a holy site for their religion as well. I disagree with all your religions. All your religions are stupid. But under any deal, there is going to be some sharing going on in Jerusalem, and it is what it is. So for all the anger and the violence over this, you're 100% wrong. But in terms of the anger and the violence over nationalism and trying to get a Palestinian state, you under no circumstances should be killing civilians to try to get that accomplished, and it's not going to work. It's going to be counterproductive, and then you become immoral. But the way to handle it is to do BDS and also to go through the international community and get a Palestinian state that way. I know it's hard because I know Israel's been rejecting it nonstop, but there is movement happening. I mean, recently the UN decided to fly the Palestinian flag, and they got non-member statehood status. That's a big step in the right direction. And virtually everybody in the international community, minus the U.S. and Israel, recognizes that the Palestinians deserve a state and they should be getting a state. So they are budging, but the answer is BDS, and the answer is nonviolent resistance, and the answer is going through the international community and eventually winning there. Again, I know it's easy for me to say because I'm not in the region and they feel like, well, we want a state now and we deserve our freedom. You should get your state now, and you do deserve freedom. But what you're doing is counterproductive, and what you're doing is immoral. And also, let's remember, so like I just laid out for you, the Palestinians were the ones who declared a day of rage, and then there were attacks on civilians and stuff like that. Also, though, look, I told you the numbers, so let's not brush those under the rug either. 7 Israelis and 27 Palestinians are dead, including 9 alleged attackers. So the attackers are a separate instance. If they were the aggressors and they were going to kill people, and many of those were in self-defense, it is what it is. You can attack civilians, end of conversation. But the 8 children and any civilians who died on either side, where they were not involved in any attack, they didn't do anything wrong, but they died, that's wrong across the board. And unfortunately, I often feel like, we have like an elementary level conversation when talking about this conflict, because people will wrongly assume that people like me, like, oh, you're not as against it when, the Palestinians kill civilians. Did you not hear the entire segment I just did, where I stressed that civilian deaths on both sides are unacceptable? So I'm 100% on the record for that. I'm just explaining what we can do and what we should do in order to prevent future attacks and prevent future problems. And some people would say even discussing a Palestinian state at this point is apologetics. You're apologizing for violence and you're apologizing for terrorists. How dare you? No, an explanation is not a rationalization. And also, like I just described, some of the violence which is based on religion and based on the holy sites, that might not be solved with a two-state solution. But would the bulk of the violence be solved? Would the bulk of the fighting and the hatred between the two sides be solved with a two-state deal? Yes, it would certainly get better, for sure. And we have multiple reasons, various reasons for believing that, as we've discussed before. Like, for example, during the last incursion into Gaza, when Netanyahu killed 80% civilians and bombed hospitals and schools and the power plant, the only power plant in Gaza. What happened after that? Hamas only had about a 45% approval rating, and then it shot up to 61% after Netanyahu leveled Gaza. So what does that show you? It shows you when you're a right-winger and you're militaristic, they're going to run to their right-wingers, and they're also going to be militaristic in response. So that's not the answer. The answer has to be to sit down at the table and get a peace deal and try to move towards a long-term solution.